The husband of Halyna Hutchins has come out in an interview where he says that he blames Alec Baldwin for the shooting. So this is on an interview with NBC. So kind of like in the last video that I did, I'm just going to go down kind of the points of what is given with this information and then kind of analyze where it's fitting in with the whole conversation of what's been going on. So they start off the interview talking about how Matt and Halyna met, how they got engaged after 3 months of knowing each other. It's a very sweet moment. And it's really, really sad. You can really tell that the two of them were deeply in love, and it's really, it underscores the part that I think is becoming more and more sad as this story unfolds, which is how Alec Baldwin has made this so much about him and so much about him that it totally overshadows the tragedy of what happens. And I do hope that if this does go to trial, eventually we get past this and it does just kind of end on a note of, honestly, no sadness of what the situation resulted in, which was the loss of someone's life. So it was a sweet moment seeing a bit of their story. Matt says that he still wears her engagement ring ever since the tragedy took place. They show multiple photos of them as a family with her 9-year-old son, Andros, and very, very sweet family. And it drives home how tragic this whole situation is. And then they get into talking about the actual day, the timeline of what happened that day. Matt says that he got a call from a member of the production team just saying that she had been shot and taken to the hospital. He then picked up his son and told him, because at the time that he then went and got his son, he found out that she had passed away. And now he had to tell his son multiple times what had happened because he didn't believe him. They then went to Santa Fe and met Alec Baldwin. And I feel like there's also a bit of, just to step outside this for a second, there's a bit of a feeling that I'm getting in the more that I talk about this, the more that I see other people talk about this, that to mention or talk about Alec Baldwin is seen as clickbait. I kind of resent that a bit because this story is absolutely tragic, very, very sad, and it's a very strange thing because it is centering around a very, very powerful character in this industry. And they're acting very, very belligerently, arrogantly, and in a way that I think addresses why it is so many people are pissed off with this industry when you talk about why people are pissed off with this industry. And Alec Baldwin has done so much politicizing, so much victimization of himself, and that it is touching a very serious nerve. And I think that it's important to keep a very close eye on how it is that he is dealing with this and how everyone else in the industry is dealing with this. Because if you look, there's a very high chance that he is going to walk away from this scot-free. And if that happens, then it needs to have happened in the context of people giving him as much shit as possible, because he is very powerful, and it is very possible that he could just walk away from this unscathed, which, if he walks out of it unscathed, is, I think, also a huge tragedy in this entire situation. So then this is getting into the actual interview, because they get back and forth with how it actually went on the day whenever him and his son met Alec Baldwin. So the interviewer asks, "You met Alec Baldwin and there was an embrace. Tell me what that was like." Matt then says, "To understand that moment, I think you have to understand the emotions. I was just looking through a way through the storm." The interviewer then says, "Did he seem distraught?" Matt then says there was a lot of emotions on both sides. It also comes out later that Matt is actually a lawyer himself. So I feel like keeping this, I guess, vague is probably a good idea, because obviously on the day of it was very, very emotional. And you can also tell that on the day, Alec Baldwin has used a lot of the information that was said on that day as a way of saying that he did nothing wrong, because obviously in the moment there was, it seems, tons of compassion going around. So I think that the amount of time that's between the day and now to actually make it very clear on that day, emotions were very high. Not everyone was in a critical space to talk about what's actually going on. I think that's important, because there's been a lot of discounting from Alec Baldwin and the producers to say, hey, on the day, no one was saying it was our fault, so therefore it isn't our fault. I think for people that are actually on the prosecution to say, I think we need to understand that in a situation like that, people are in shock. You can't actually use what's said on the day to vindicate everything else when we're actually seeing the facts in the cold light of day. So I think that's a good idea there. Then, in terms of actually talking about the lawsuit, They say that Matt Hutchins has filed a lawsuit against Baldwin and other producers and crew members on the film, now expressing outrage with Baldwin's recent interview where he says, quote, "The actor shifted blame over the death of his wife, Halyna." And getting into this point is where I'll say kind of what I've been saying in each of these videos is that I think that the fact that Alec Baldwin decided to go and do that interview with ABC changed pretty much everything, because if he had not done that and had pretty much taken I'm going to stay quiet, I'm, a notable person, I'm just going to deal with this quietly out of respect, then I think that would have been the least controversial way to go about doing this, and it would have shown a lot of respect. To go about it like this, not only has he been saying things that show a lack of disrespect, it seems like just a lack of connection to reality, which is angering people because it totally overshadows the event. So what he then said about this, what they played a quote from Baldwin where he had said, "I feel that someone is responsible for what happened, and I can't say who that is, but it is definitely not me." It then goes to Matt, and Matt says, "Watching that made me angry. Just so angry hearing him talk about her death so publicly in such a detailed way, and then accepting no responsibility after essentially describing killing her." And I do think that actually, I'll comment on after going through, because the interviewer then after this says he said that he felt grief but no guilt. Matt then says, "It almost sounds like he was the victim, and hearing him blame Halyna in the interview and shift responsibility to others and seeing him cry about it, I just feel like, are we really supposed to feel bad about you here, Mr. Baldwin?" The interviewer then says, "Do you think that the majority of the blame lies with Alec Baldwin?" Matt then goes on to make the point that most people in the really high up legacy corporate media don't make about this, which is the idea that the person holding the gun causing it to discharge is not responsible is absurd to me. Every individual that touches a firearm has a responsibility for gun safety, but gun safety was not the only problem on that set. There were a number of industry standards that were not practiced. There was a culture of cost cutting that led to Halyna's death. And then it then cuts to the attorney's statement that says any claim that Alec Baldwin was reckless is entirely false. It then goes back to Matt, who ends with saying, "With the lawsuit, we're looking for justice in many ways, looking to hold accountable people responsible for Halyna's death, which was totally preventable. In the end, justice is not going to bring Halyna back, but the memory of this can keep people safe in the future." And then it cuts to after the interview where the hosts are all talking about it. It then goes on to say that her family is actually all in Ukraine right now. She's from Ukraine, which makes this whole story even sadder. Matt then says that he actually lost a parent during the COVID pandemic. And they reiterate the anger that he feels towards Alec Baldwin. He says, yes, that he is an attorney and wants justice for everyone involved, but towards Alec Baldwin specifically. And then someone in commentary says that he was very measured, but it was very clear that he had a message going on. I think Alec Baldwin's behavior in the aftermath of the tragedy is what has defined the story. He's made this a story about his hubris, his ego, his power. I think it's shameful because it has taken away from the actual victims of the story. This could have been a story that we no longer had any reason to talk about after a week. Could have been a story about a victim, remembering her, the work that she had done. They've created foundations in her name. It could have so easily no longer been a story, but it actively is, and the person that is actively making it about that is Alec Baldwin, from everything that he says, from just the hubris of saying that he bears no responsibility. And that's what this addition to the story is pretty much showing, that Matt Hutchins is very, very angry because of Alec Baldwin, because he's made the entire story about him. It has overshadowed his deceased wife, and now, because Alec Baldwin has taken so many steps to say that he bears no responsibility, and because he is so powerful enough to actually overshadow the entire story, justice now means actively making him pay for that level of hubris. I mean, this is a story about a hugely powerful man in the film industry, and also Alec Baldwin, his family came over on the Mayflower. So we're talking about someone who has got institutional power, generational power, industry power, and this is a very controversial figure who has now stepped in shit, and how he comes out of it is a huge part of this whole weird culture war thing that Hollywood pisses people off about. Alec Baldwin represents the film industry, represents to a large degree the elites, and the point in that is that if he had apologized from the very beginning of this and stayed silent, and if he had seemed like there was a level of humility, this would be a totally different story. I think you would have to admit that if he had come out as being wrong from the beginning, he could have even come out of this with more goodwill than he might have even had before any of this actually happened. But that didn't happen, and any goodwill that could have been there is totally sour and is becoming so much worse. And as they point out in this story, there are not even criminal charges that have been announced by the DA. And as the DA even said, they were getting very impatient with Alec Baldwin because he continued to talk, continued to press investigators on what they should be looking for. And I think the goodwill that was there whenever the emotions of the day were high from the DA, and the DA has said that they gave Alec Baldwin a lot of leeway on that day. If that is no longer there, then there could actually be criminal charges coming. And I have no idea when that would be, but they have to be coming at some point. And I think that's the other thing. There could have been no criminal charges for him if he had not inflamed everyone about this story. Trying to push the spotlight off of him has made it about him completely. And it's a story about power, financial power, cultural power, and it represents the film industry entirely. And because Alec Baldwin has been so vocal on so many things, it makes this story really, really toxic and just a very hot story to follow and an important one to follow. So subscribe to 5 Minute Critic. We give updates on the Alec Baldwin story regularly.